The Bolivian justice announced the trial against former de facto President Añez, which was set for this Thursday in the case known as coup d'etat 2. Political movement in Uruguay denounced the government of Luis Lacalle Pou headed over the port of Montevideo to a multinational for 50 years. At least 6 people were killed and 13 others wounded in a suicide attack in El Gab Junction in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Bolivian justice announced the trial against former de facto President Añez, which was set for this Thursday in the case known as coup d'etat 2. The opening of the trial against Añez and others involved in the case coup d'etat 2 was left without date because the first anti-corruption court of La Paz left without effect the beginning of this judicial process. Once the hearing began, a process of prior consideration was opened in which some of the parties involved requested that the hearing be held in person. In the vicinities of the court, pro-Añez demonstrators faced others who demanded her imprisonment and justice after the massacres of Senkara and Secaba. Añez and 8 other defendants are accused for the alleged commission of crimes against the Constitution and the laws, which led an irregular act committed in her proclamation as de facto president after the coup d'etat of 2019. Two military members of the Añez government, Jorge Terceros, commander of the Air Force, and Palmiro Yarjuri, commander of the Navy, with decisive roles during the coup d'etat of November 2019, requested in summary trial, which means that they recognize the responsibility or guilt. The Bolivian Minister of Justice, Ivan Lima, offers statements in this regard.
A trial has begun for violation of Constitution. A trial has begun for breach of duty against 2 people who have been declared rebels and contumacious to the law. I am referring to the former commander of the National Armed Force and the former commander of the National Police. They have not showed their faces. They are not showed up. They are fugitives from justice. And the other military men who, together with Mr. Añez, have been tried, have been already acknowledged and have submitted in writing their request for abbreviated proceedings. This is important news for the country. There are 2 people, Yarjuri and Terceros, who have asked the prosecutor's office to issue a sentence through abbreviated proceedings. This is an acknowledgement of responsibility of guilt.
Mexico, Congress debates this Thursday the energy reform promoted by President López Obrador to recover sovereignty over this strategic resource. The objective of the proposal made by the President seeks to recover the sovereignty and regulatory capacity of the state over the exploitation of the country's strategic resources. The President asserted that disinformation campaign is trying to distort the objectives of the initiative and hide the political and economic interests of the power group that benefit from the reform made by previous governments, and added that the proposal underway includes the participation of social movements, suppliers, and opinion leaders. In Guatemala, the Court of Higher Risk ordered that judicial recollection of 2 covered ditches in the military encartment of Cabón Alta Verapaz as part of the process against the ex-commissioner from the military. Our correspondent Santiago Botón tells us more.
Families of the genocide victims leave offerings and summon a spirit at the gates of the military headquarters in Cobán, Alta Verapaz. Meanwhile, inside the facilities, the court issues the judicial recognitions of 2 covert corpse pits. Inside of them, the expert from the Foundation of Forensic Anthropology informed there were 536 people, all with signs of illegal execution: boys, girls, women, men. In total, 14 covered corpse pits were exhumed between 2012 and 2015 at the request of relatives and surviving victims of the genocide.
My husband's remains were found here in the military sector 21, which is now Creon Pass. In 2016, my husband's remains were identified. He was kidnapped on January 13, 1983.
Among the 536 skeletons found, the remains of 3 farmer peasants from Tactic, Alta Verapaz, were exhumed. These bones paved the way for the trial against the military ex-commissioner José Manuel Castañeda Aparicio for the crime of forced disappearances. 6 years ago, he identified one of the 3 people who disappeared in this place. This is clearly an undeniable proof of his involvement with the responsibility of the state security forces, especially during the years of repression in the 1980s. Prosecutors of the public ministry and litigants have requested that the ex-commissioner be sentenced to 120 years in prison, a process delayed since 2014 according to the victims' relatives. We want justice, for justice to truly be here with us as survivors that we are of the armed conflict, and we want the state to take up its part again, to acknowledge its mistakes and to compensate the victims. The military, at the moment, forbids the access of several journalists to the site, so they couldn't record the judicial recollection of the corpse pits.
Santiago Botón, TeleSUR Norte de Guatemala.
In Peru, President Pedro Castillo has strongly rejected the claims that exist of a parallel cabinet, a theory spread by opposition sectors. The president has clarified that the claims are contrary to his ethics and moral. According to the Peruvian president, opposition sectors have falsely maintained that he instead to shut down the Congress to took all the power. Castillo considers that the authors of this smart campaign only intend to impede his government and that the great demands of the country continue to be prioritized, such as the issue of insecurity, which has become a crucial topic for the Peruvian executive.
We have come here with the purpose of serving the country, and we want to tell you that here they have been creating ghosts, sometimes unknown voices that do not go with our ethics, with our morals. They have created a shadow cabinet, which I strongly reject. They have been created saying that we want to shut down the Congress to make some laws for us because we want to stay in power, because it comes from the other side that does not see or live as a regional governor does in front of his people, who do not want these great demands to be prioritized, for example. And on top of that, there are problems such as the problem of citizen insecurity. Why do you think that we have appointed our previous Minister of Justice as a Prime Minister? Because we have to modify certain norms. We have to make the laws for those who commit crimes a little more drastic.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Political movement in Uruguay announced that the government of Luis Lacalle Pou headed over the port of Montevideo to a multinational for 50 years. The Board Front of Uruguay announced this Wednesday that government headed by Luis Lacalle Pou for handing over the port of Montevideo to the multinational GUATEMALA as the government granted it to a monopoly of the container terminal of 50 years. Frente Amplista sectors allege that the executive commits serious crimes against the public patrimony. The complaint against the government's measures was filed with the Public Prosecutor's Office. The detractors of Luis Lacalle Pou's decisions indicate that the government did not respond to any of the previous appeal and that this attitude shows the legitimacy of handing over the port of Montevideo to a private foreign company. In Moscow on Thursday, during a press conference, Russian President Vladimir Putin backs Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. Putin gives strong backing to his Kazakh counterpart in the pair's first meeting after the crisis stopped in Kazakhstan. Russia's altogether with the collective security treaty organizations appeared to bolster Tokayev to curb the internal clashes and the violence that Kazakh's president clarified as a work of bandits and international terrorists. Tokayev also stressed his support for Russia's position on the indivisibility of security in the Eurasian space as tensions mount between Russia and the West.
Thanks to the strong position of President Tokayev and the resolute support of Russia and all of its CSTO allies, the situation in Kazakhstan was brought under control in the shortest time possible. Law and order were restored, and peace and tranquility returned to Kazakhstan. Tokayev is now doing everything he can to ensure that the situation becomes finally normal. We can see that life in Kazakhstan has returned to a stable, calm course. There is full support in society for the course of the country's leadership towards solving large-scale tasks. And we in Russia, for our part, will do all we can to support the President of Kazakhstan. The Russian Federation plays an extremely important role in ensuring stability and security in our region. I would like to say that we support Russia's position on the indivisibility.
On Thursday, military forces of Russia and Belarus have started joint executive of the territory of Belarus. Both governments have stated that these are operations for the protection of their borders. Moscow and Minsk have stated that these training are carried out to solve tasks of suppressing and repelling external aggressions in the course of a defense operation, as well as contracting terrorism and protecting the interests of the Union. In particular, the troops will train in blocking arms and ammunition delivery channels, destroying armed formations and reconnaissance of the enemy. Denmark said on Thursday it was ready to allow U.S. military troops on its soil as part of a new bilateral defense agreement with the U.S.
Such a deal between the United States and Denmark opens the door to new forms of cooperation and to military activities in a certain number of fields in Denmark. This will depend on the upcoming discussions with the United States, but that could include the presence of American soldiers, material and military equipment on Danish soil.
We'll take more news after this short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. At least 6 people were killed and 13 others wounded in a suicide attack at El Gab Junction in the Somali capital Mogadishu on Thursday. Abdi Fattah Eden Hassam, Somali police spokesman who confirmed, said a suicide bomber wearing explosive vest went around his waist, blew himself up, causing multiple casualties. Witnesses said the blast was huge and caused panic among the residents. The militant group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for Thursday's bombing in the respective cities, saying its fighters regretted delegates selecting the upcoming lower house lawmakers. Angola's Minister of Justice and Human Rights stressed that more than 700 criminal prosecutions are ongoing for alleged acts of corruption. Authorities informed that accusations respond to alleged crimes of embezzlement, corruption, money laundering, obtaining undue advantage, tax fraud, and other illicit acts in the economic and financial sphere, according to the National Asset Recovery Service of the Attorney General's Office. Money and material goods have been collected inside and outside the national territory, amounting to more than $11,486 million, including factories, houses, buildings, and sharing in companies. The United Nations Children's Fund in Afghanistan warned on Thursday that at least 1 million children are at risk of dying as a result of severe acute malnutrition in the country, which could worsen if urgent action is not taken. The Ministry of Public Health said through local media that the current number of malnourishing children is about 4.4 million, while cases are accelerating in the midst of severe economic crisis and lack of active care centers to assist. According to the organization, Afghanistan requires immediate humanitarian aid as the crisis has been growing exponentially since the Taliban took power in August. This military occupation also left a severe humanitarian crisis, which now affects several million people in the country. President Ibrahim Raisi said that strengthening relations with the international community as well as resolving the conflict in Yemen and Syria are priorities for his government. The president stated that his country's foreign policies aims to strengthen relations, build trust, and dialogue with countries around the world, especially with neighboring countries. Raisi noted that the nation has been plagued by terrorism, systematic crime, and foreign interference, and stressed that resolving the crisis in Syria and Yemen and forming an exclusive government in Afghanistan are among his country's priorities. Problems in bilateral economic and trade relations between China and the U.S. should be properly resolved in the spirit of mutual respect and equal consultation, said Foreign Minister spokesman Zhao Liyan on Thursday.
China always advocates the spirit of mutual respect and equal consultation to properly resolve the problems arising in bilateral economic and trade relations between China and the U.S. Threats and pressures based on one's unilateral interests will not help solve problems, but only undermine mutual trust and the atmosphere for dialogue and negotiation.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. From Telesur English, I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching.